Reasons why not to buy tiny houses. Here is a reality check that almost nobody brings up when tiny houses are trending all over the internet. Most tiny house regret does not happen in the first month or even the first year. It shows up quietly later when the excitement wears off and the lifestyle stops feeling intentional and starts feeling restrictive. Tiny houses are marketed as smart, freeing, and modern, but those promises are usually framed for viewers, not for people actually living inside them long term. This is not about trashing tiny houses or scaring anyone away. This is about pulling the camera back and looking at the full picture, the parts that do not fit into a 10-second clip. If you are thinking about buying a tiny house, this conversation matters more than the highlight reels. The space pressure. The biggest challenge with tiny houses is not the lack of space, it is the constant pressure that space creates. Every single decision you make, from buying groceries to bringing home a new jacket, carries weight because there is nowhere for excess to hide. There is no spare room, no overflow closet, no corner where things can temporarily live until you deal with them later. Your home becomes extremely honest, sometimes uncomfortably so. The daily compromise cycle. Tiny houses require compromise, but not in a one-time way. It is a daily cycle of trade-offs that never really ends. You might sacrifice counter space to fit a dining area, then realize cooking feels cramped. You might sacrifice seating to gain storage, then notice you never feel fully relaxed. These compromises are not dramatic, but they are constant. Living in a tiny house means accepting that something will always feel slightly inconvenient. The novelty expiration. In the beginning, tiny house living feels like a personal revolution. You feel lighter, more intentional, and proud of choosing a different path. But novelty does not last forever. Once the excitement fades, the house stays exactly the same. The charm of sleeping lofts, compact kitchens, and clever layouts can wear thin when they stop feeling clever and start feeling limiting. Familiarity should make a home feel easier, but in a tiny house, familiarity often highlights the constraints instead of softening them. The work and rest collision. Modern life often requires flexible spaces, especially with remote work becoming normal. Tiny houses struggle here more than people expect. When your workspace is also your living space and sometimes your sleeping space, your brain never gets a clear signal to switch off. Work spills into rest, rest feels incomplete, and focus becomes harder to maintain. Over time, this overlap can affect sleep quality, motivation, and mental clarity. A home should help separate the parts of your life, not blur them together constantly. The storage reality. Tiny house storage is often praised as innovative, but innovation does not always equal convenience. Hidden drawers, lift-up beds, and multi-purpose furniture look impressive, but they can turn simple actions into multi-step processes. Getting dressed, cooking a meal, or cleaning up takes more effort than it would in a larger space. When everyday tasks require extra thought and movement, they slowly drain energy. The hosting limitation. Tiny houses are rarely built with social life in mind. Hosting friends, family, or even short visits becomes complicated when space is tight and privacy is limited. Conversations overlap, noise travels instantly, and there is nowhere to retreat if you need a break. Over time, this can subtly change how often you invite people over or how long they stay. A home should support connection, not quietly discourage it. Many tiny house owners realize too late that their space does not match the kind of social life they want. The resale challenge. Tiny houses appeal to a very specific type of buyer, which can make them difficult to move on from. What feels perfect for your lifestyle might feel impractical or unappealing to someone else. This limits flexibility if your plans change or your priorities shift. A home is usually one of the biggest commitments people make, and when that commitment locks you into a narrow audience, it can feel risky. The freedom promised up front can turn into constraint later. The aging factor. Tiny houses often work best for people who are young, flexible, and comfortable with physical limitations like ladders or tight spaces. As time passes, those limitations can become more noticeable. Climbing into sleeping lofts, navigating compact bathrooms, and constantly bending or squeezing can become frustrating. Comfort needs change with age, and many people underestimate how much ease matters until they no longer have it. A home should adapt to you over time, not demand more effort as you settle in. The emotional attachment trap. Tiny house living often becomes part of a person's identity. It represents values like simplicity, independence, and intentional living. While that can feel empowering, it can also make it harder to admit when the lifestyle stops working. Challenges get reframed as personal shortcomings instead of design limitations. When your home becomes something you have to defend, it becomes harder to evaluate honestly. A good home should support growth, not lock you into proving a point. The cost versus value gap. Tiny houses are often framed as financially smart, but the value equation is more complex than it appears. While the initial cost may be lower, the compromises in comfort, flexibility, and longevity can outweigh the savings for some people. Spending less upfront does not always mean spending wisely long-term. A home should offer stability and ease, not just a lower price tag. When value is measured only in money and not in daily experience, disappointment can follow. The isolation effect. Living in a tiny house can sometimes feel isolating, especially if it is located away from dense communities. Without shared walls, neighbors, or common spaces, social interaction requires more effort. That isolation may feel peaceful at first, but over time, it can turn into loneliness. A home should balance privacy with connection. Tiny houses can lean heavily toward isolation, which not everyone realizes until they are living it. The maintenance reality. Small spaces amplify problems. A minor issue can affect the entire house because everything is interconnected. When something breaks, there is no alternative area to shift into temporarily. Maintenance feels more urgent and more intrusive. Over time, this can create a sense of fragility, like the house requires constant attention to function properly. A home should feel resilient, not delicate. The lifestyle rigidity. Tiny houses demand consistency. Routines matter more, habits become rigid, and flexibility decreases. Spontaneity can feel harder when space is optimized for specific uses. Life changes like new hobbies, new relationships, or new work demands may not fit easily into the existing setup. A home should accommodate evolution, not resist it. When lifestyle rigidity sets in, growth feels constrained. The freedom misconception. The biggest reason many people regret buying a tiny house is the misunderstanding of freedom. Freedom is not just about owning less or spending less. It is about feeling supported, comfortable, and adaptable. Tiny houses can remove certain burdens, but they also introduce new ones that are often invisible in marketing. True freedom feels spacious mentally, not just efficient physically. If your home requires constant adjustment, justification, or sacrifice, the promise of freedom starts to feel hollow. Tiny houses are not a mistake for everyone, but they are far more demanding than most people realize before buying one. The dream is beautiful, the reality is layered, and the gap between the two is where regret usually lives. If this breakdown helped you see tiny houses more clearly, hit like so more people can hear the full story. Subscribe if you want honest conversations instead of polished hype, and share this with someone who is currently deep in the tiny house dream.